The hospital corridor smelled of antiseptic and sleepless nights, a place where joy and fear often lived side by side. For Anna, it was supposed to be the beginning of something beautiful. She had just given birth, her body exhausted but her heart full, cradling a fragile new life that depended entirely on her. Yet instead of warmth and support, she was met with cold footsteps and a familiar voice sharpened by resentment. Her mother-in-law, Valentina, stood at the doorway of the maternity ward with crossed arms and eyes that carried judgment rather than pride. Valentina never approved of Anna. From the moment her son married her, she believed the girl wasn't good enough, too poor, too quiet, too independent. The birth of the baby should have softened her, but instead it seemed to give her a sense of authority she felt entitled to wield. She spoke loudly, ignoring the nurses and other mothers nearby, insisting that Anna had no right to stay there any longer than necessary. She accused her of embarrassing the family, of being weak, of trapping her son with a child. Each word landed like a slap, draining the last of Anna's strength. Anna tried to protest, her voice trembling, reminding Valentina that she had just given birth and needed rest. But Valentina only scoffed, saying she had given birth herself decades ago and never complained. She demanded that Anna leave the hospital immediately and stop pretending to be something she wasn't. The cruelty of it stunned everyone who overheard, yet no one stepped in. Power has a way of silencing rooms. As Valentina turned to leave, convinced she had won, the sound of confident footsteps echoed down the corridor. A man approached, tall, calm, dressed simply but carrying an unmistakable presence. He wasn't a doctor or hospital staff. When he spoke, his voice was steady and firm, asking if there was a problem. Valentina froze. Recognition hit her face like a sudden chill. This was not just any visitor. This was someone whose authority did not need shouting. The man introduced himself as Anna's father. A man Valentina had dismissed for years, believing him to be irrelevant, powerless, and absent. What she never knew was that he had spent his life building quiet influence, the kind that doesn't announce itself but commands respect when it arrives. He had flown in as soon as he heard what was happening. His eyes moved from Anna to the newborn, softening instantly, then returned to Valentina, hard as stone. He spoke calmly, but every word carried weight. He reminded Valentina that hospitals were not battlegrounds for family pride, that Anna was protected, legally and personally. He made it clear that any further harassment would be dealt with immediately. Valentina tried to interrupt, but her voice failed her. For the first time, she had no control. The corridor felt smaller, the air heavier. Nurses suddenly found their courage and stepped closer, ready to support Anna. Valentina stood speechless, her authority stripped away in seconds. Without another word, she turned and left, her heels clicking faster than before. Anna's father sat beside his daughter, holding her hand as she cried, not from pain this time, but from relief. In that moment, Anna understood that strength did not always look loud or cruel. Sometimes, it arrived quietly and ended storms with a single sentence. Elsewhere, in a brightly lit television studio thousands of miles away, another confrontation was unfolding, one that would soon make headlines. Snoop Dogg sat on the couch of the Today with Jenna and Friends show, invited for what was supposed to be a relaxed, upbeat conversation. The audience expected laughter, nostalgia, and charm. What they didn't expect was tension creeping into the dialogue. The conversation shifted, unexpectedly toward social responsibility, public image, and the expectations placed on celebrities. Snoop remained calm at first, answering thoughtfully, but it became clear that the tone of the questioning had changed. What felt like curiosity turned into judgment. Subtle remarks suggested hypocrisy, questioning his past, his influence, and his right to speak on certain issues. The warmth drained from the room. Snoop leaned back, listening carefully. He had navigated far harsher environments than a morning talk show, but there was something about being disrespected under the guise of friendliness that struck a nerve. He responded firmly, defending his growth, his work, and the communities he supported. His words were measured, but the tension was undeniable. As the exchange continued, it became clear that the hosts were not backing down. The conversation felt less like dialogue and more like provocation. Snoop paused, looked around the studio, and smiled, not a playful smile, but one of realization. He calmly stated that he wouldn't sit somewhere he wasn't respected. Then, without raising his voice or causing a scene, he stood up, thanked the audience, and walked off the set. The studio fell silent. Cameras scrambled. Viewers at home watched in shock as producers cut to commercial. Within minutes, social media erupted. Some criticized him, but many praised his composure, calling it a masterclass in self-respect. Snoop didn't need to shout to make a statement. His exit said everything. Back at the hospital, Anna watched the evening news from her bed, her father beside her. The story about Snoop Dogg played on the screen, and she felt an unexpected connection. Different worlds, different people, yet the same message echoed clearly. No one, no matter their status, deserved to be humiliated or pushed into silence. Valentina never returned to the hospital that day. In time, boundaries were drawn, firmly and clearly. Anna healed, physically and emotionally, learning that standing up for oneself didn't always require confrontation. Sometimes it required knowing when to stay and when to walk away. Both moments, one in a quiet hospital corridor, the other on a national television stage, shared a powerful truth. Respect is not something to beg for. It is something you either receive or refuse to tolerate. And when dignity is challenged, silence is not weakness. Walking away can be the loudest statement of all. The maternity ward was unusually quiet for a place where new lives began every day. Soft cries echoed behind closed doors, and nurses moved gently through the hallway, careful not to disturb exhausted mothers. For Irina, lying pale and weak on the narrow hospital bed, the world felt distant and unreal. Her body ached, her arms trembled as she held her newborn child, and all she wanted was rest and reassurance. Instead, tension filled the room the moment her mother-in-law stepped inside. From the beginning, Irina's relationship with her husband's mother, Galina, had been strained. Galina was a woman who believed authority came with age and that obedience was owed to her without question. She never hid her belief that Irina had married into the family by luck rather than worth. The birth of the baby should have united them, but instead it seemed to intensify Galina's need for control. She stood by the bed, her face tight with disapproval, scanning the room as if searching for faults. Without lowering her voice, Galina began criticizing everything: how Irina looked, how she held the baby, even how long she planned to stay in the hospital. She accused her of exaggerating her pain and wasting family resources. Then came the words that shattered the fragile peace. Galina demanded that Irina leave the maternity ward immediately. She said the family had no obligation to support her anymore and coldly suggested that maybe Irina had come to the wrong station in life, implying she didn't belong where she was. Irina tried to speak, but exhaustion stole her strength. Tears welled in her eyes as she clutched her baby closer, feeling small and defenseless. Nurses hesitated at the door, unsure whether they were witnessing a private family dispute or something more serious. Galina took their silence as permission, her confidence growing as she continued her verbal assault. In her mind, she was untouchable. Then the atmosphere shifted. A man entered the room quietly, unnoticed at first. He was dressed simply, carrying a small travel bag, his expression calm but alert. When he spoke, his voice was low and steady, asking what was happening. Galina turned sharply, irritation already forming, until recognition struck her. This was Irina's uncle, a man Galina had dismissed for years as insignificant. What she didn't realize was that he was also a respected legal professional who understood power better than most. He listened without interrupting as Galina spoke, letting her expose her cruelty fully. When she finished, expecting agreement, the man replied with surprising firmness. He explained that Irina was under medical care, protected by hospital regulations and the law. He reminded Galina that harassment in a medical facility could have serious consequences. His words were not loud, but they were final. The room seemed to exhale all at once. Galina tried to argue, but the confidence drained from her face. Nurses stepped in immediately, backing Irina and asking Galina to leave. For the first time, Galina had nothing to say. She stood frozen for a moment, then turned and walked out, her authority dissolved into silence. Irina broke down, sobbing from relief as her uncle placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. She realized in that moment that strength often arrived when you least expected it, and sometimes from the people you underestimated. Later that same day, across an ocean and in a completely different world, another confrontation unfolded under bright studio lights. Snoop Dogg took his seat on the Today with Jenna and Friends show, greeted by applause and smiles. The interview began casually, filled with humor and reflections on his career. Viewers settled in, expecting a lighthearted segment with one of hip-hop's most recognizable figures. As the conversation progressed, however, the tone subtly shifted. Questions became sharper, focusing on controversy, public responsibility, and Snoop's past in a way that felt less reflective and more accusatory. He remained composed, answering thoughtfully, but it was clear he sensed a change. The warmth of the exchange faded, replaced by an undercurrent of tension that even the audience could feel. When the hosts pressed further, implying contradictions in his values and questioning his credibility, Snoop paused. He looked directly at them, his expression calm but serious. He spoke about growth, accountability, and the importance of respect, especially when discussing someone's life in front of millions. His words were honest, but the pushback continued, as if the conversation had become a test rather than an interview. At that moment, Snoop made a choice. He calmly stated that he was there to share, not to be judged or cornered. He explained that respect was non-negotiable for him, regardless of the platform. Then he stood up. There was no shouting, no dramatic gestures. He thanked the audience politely and walked off the set, leaving behind stunned hosts in a silent studio. Within minutes, the moment spread across social media. Clips of his exit went viral, sparking debates about celebrity treatment, media ethics, and personal boundaries. Many praised Snoop for his restraint, noting how powerful it was to walk away without hostility. Others criticized the situation that led to it, questioning why interviews often crossed into confrontation under the guise of honesty. Back in the hospital, Irina watched the news coverage from her phone while her baby slept beside her. The story resonated deeply. She saw in Snoop's quiet exit the same strength her uncle had shown earlier that day, and the same strength she was beginning to find within herself. Neither situation required shouting to reclaim dignity. Both showed that knowing when to leave was sometimes the strongest response. In the days that followed, Galina's influence faded. Boundaries were established, and Irina's recovery became the focus once more. She learned that family ties did not grant permission for cruelty, and respect could not be demanded through fear. Meanwhile, Snoop's walkout became a cultural talking point, a reminder that even on the biggest stages, self-respect mattered more than appearances. Two separate stories, worlds apart, yet bound by the same truth. Power does not always belong to the loudest voice in the room. Sometimes, it belongs to the person who refuses to be humiliated, who chooses dignity over conflict and walks away on their own terms.